Victoria and others can have this really symbiotic relationship with a philanthropic organisation who understand and support organisations to do the work that we do. So I'm going to hand it over to Nicole. Thank you.
Can everyone hear? Yeah, can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. Thank you all for joining us for the final panel session of the day. We're acutely aware that it's the graveyard shift and we're standing between you and drinks. But hopefully the getting physical has helped re-energise everyone in the room for the discussion. Before we begin, and on behalf of the panel, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here today. I'm delighted to be able to play a role in the Playgroup conference for 2026. I've had a long association with Playgroups, first as a child attending with my mother, I won't say how many years ago, who still connects with some of her Playgroup parents, then as a parent myself with my own children, and now as a partner and advocate for Playgroups and the many benefits that they provide for children, families and communities. At the Ian Potter Foundation, we're proud to support Playgroup Amplify, which has a consortium of Playgroup organisations involved to help evolve, strengthen and grow Playgroups across Australia. And Playgroups play an integral role in many of the projects that we support at the Ian Potter Foundation. The theme of this year's conference is Better Together, and this session is really about bringing that idea to life, moving beyond theory and exploring what actually works in practice. We will learn about what's needed, what's been challenging and what's made a lasting impact. And we're joined by a fantastic panel with representatives from local, state and national organisations, all working with families and communities to support children. We were hoping to have Liz Ersoy, from Peeple UK on the panel, but unfortunately due to the conflict in the Middle East, she was unable to join us, but we've been very fortunate to have Rachel step in her place alongside Chris and Elfie. We will be taking questions at the end of the panel, so please use the conference app to pop those questions in as they come to mind, and we'll endeavour to get through as many as we can in the Q&A section. Now, I was going to introduce the panel, but Chris encouraged me to save myself the embarrassment of mispronouncing his surname. So without further ado, I will hand over to the panel to introduce themselves and start sharing a little bit more about their partnerships experiences. So Rachel, I might ask you to go first.
Hello, everybody. My name's Rachel Haywood. I work for the Tomorrow Today Foundation in beautiful Benalla. We're an independent, not-for-profit organisation, a community organisation that does some extraordinary work. We all know that 1 in 6 children experience disadvantage and poverty in Australia, and in Benalla, our statistics are twice that. So Tomorrow Today sees education as a part of breaking that intergenerational cycle. And in doing that, we're currently leading a 20-plus year initiative through our Education Benalla program, which focuses on families, schools and community. It's a whole school approach. My role in that is in the early years space, so antenatal to 5 years of age, and I'm a PEEP practitioner, so Parents Early Education Partnership, and I work with parents. We acknowledge them as their child's first and most important educator and ongoing educator in a child's life. So when it comes to partnerships, I'm dealing with one of the biggest partnerships, and that is families. I'm partnershiping with parents, but we're a whole community initiative, and we are trying to impact every child, one child at a time, so it takes a whole community. So we've got 120 partnerships throughout our 20-year, 20-plus programs. But for me, a lot of my partnerships are dealing with maternal child health, Benalla Health, the councils, in that early development of child's life. So that's where our partnerships are really, really important.
Excellent. Elfie?
Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Elfie Taylor, part of the Common Education Foundation, so an Our Place initiative, which is based here in Victoria. We are schools as community platforms or hubs-like settings in 9 of the most disadvantaged communities within Victoria. And similar to is that education we see is the key to getting families out of that cycle of poverty. What we do in the approach, where our approach is philanthropically funded, but on our school as community platform or hub-like settings, we have all state and federally funded programs. So each site has early learning, each site has a primary school, each site has playgroups, and each site has maternal and child health. There's like the core foundational offerings of those sites. And then in addition to that, because we are a place-based organisation, every other site has different offerings. So allied health, family services, family supports, legal services, English as a second language classes. You know, it's based on what that local community needs. So our work is the partnership. So we often talk about what we do as the glue. And so what we do is the glue is we support families to access services. So there's that partnership there. But we also support services to access families. It's not just about services sitting in their little offices and waiting for families to come to them. It's actually about how do the services actually engage and partner with families and outreach to families, particularly in communities experiencing vulnerability. And then we work with services to work with services. How do we identify gaps and how do we identify duplications and how do we create a local partnership together where that local service system is working much more cohesively together for that local community. And so that's what we do. My role as a director within our place is a lot of that government, state and federal advocacy on this way of working and kind of demonstrating how this model can be replicated in other communities experiencing this kind of disadvantage. Chris?
Cool. Hi, everyone. So my name's Chris Thongnoppakun. I'm not a huge public speaker. We should have Catherine Little here. I was thinking about the first time I ever had to public speak and I ran behind a curtain. So that is looking pretty good. So I work for SNAICC. We're the peak body for Aboriginal children in the early years. So I head up the community partner team, and our partnerships is primarily with the federal government and the ACCOs across the country. So we support probably around 100 ACCOs to deliver federally funded programs, but we can sort of dive into the nuances during the conversations. But that's my role here. We've been involved with Playgroups Victoria for about 24 months now in a collaboration between PG Vic and Minderoo. So lovely to be here. Don't know why so much of you are still here. It's like 4 o'clock now, so I thought this room would be a lot smaller, but yeah, good to meet everyone.
We might move to some questions now. So my first question for the panel is, from your experience, what are the non-negotiables for working in a partnership across different organisations?
Someone else can go first.
Yeah.
From an Our Place perspective, some of the non-negotiables to make a good partnership, like you can have partnerships on paper, and we've all seen those, but what makes a really good partnership is having a clear shared common goal, something that both organisations or both parties or both people are actually trying to achieve together, and that's being on that same page to do that. Another thing from an organisation perspective is the ability to have the time to do partnerships. Partnerships do take time. They're when I talked before about we support services to work together. We say working differently together. We're not the funder of those services, so we don't have any incentives for those services to work differently. So it really is around encouraging those, managers and things to really think about, do their staff have the time to collaborate, to work together? And that's a key enabler, because otherwise it relies just on good people, which is okay until that good person moves on to a different role. And so if you want a sustaining partnership, you need to put some structures in place to enable that. So that would be my top two.
I'll agree with that. I think I've got some doodles on my page here. The way I like to look at partnerships, and my team would have heard this a fair bit since I've managed them, that the ecological model of the child can be used in so many ways. And I think partnership's one of those. So think of it as an onion. Like that first layer is what can you do to partner with communities and with ACCOs across the country. The next layer is sort of what can your organisation do? How can you establish memorandums of understanding, ways of working, whatever it might be? And then more broadly, what can the sector do in regards to I suppose in my context, we have different streams of work that require partnerships, and one of the key things at the moment is transition. So when federally funded programs fund mainstream providers to do a service for a particular community, and if it involves, anything related to closing the gap, so the targets within closing the gap, out-of-home care, all of that business, we know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities are better placed to do that work for their communities. So I think there's a good commitment in government at the moment to essentially transition that funding from mainstream providers into community control organisations. And today we actually had 6 ACOs from DSS-funded First Nations Playgroup program. So with the support of Minderoo, we've managed to get them from all across the country, all the way up in Geraldton, WA. So we've flown them in to this conference, but that's just such a good example of actual tangible commitment, more than lip service, to partnering at that sort of systemic level. So I just really wanted to bring that, and happy to talk about it more if you have anything specific.
Did you have anything on that,
Look,
Rachel?
mine was a little bit like yours, Elfie, and I think the non-negotiable is that shared and aligned vision. We all need to be on the same page when we're working with our partners. And as part of our Education Manila program, there's 3 sort of subcategories to it, where I talked about it starts with the family, and we move into schools, and we move into community, and that needs to flow. And we all need to be on the same page, because we don't just stop there with family. That needs to actually keep evolving and flowing on. So that shared vision and the goals are the most important, non-negotiable.
When you start with that shared vision and goals, what helps you then kind of move towards implementation and translation? Are there any tips or recommendations you'd share with the audience?
Can I jump in again?
Yeah.
You go for it, Chris.
Sorry, I say I don't like public speaking with them.
Did a great job.
Everyone's naked right now. Sorry, I should not have said that. What was I going to say? What were we talking about?
Flow. We were talking about
Enthusiasm
flow
to
and
action.
Oh, yeah. So I've been on I reckon I'm much better in smaller groups. You've got to just take my word on that. So I've been on about 20 sort of on-country consults across the country. Expansion activity, transition activity, audits, all of that sort of business, and a bit of history. I used to work for the federal government, and I didn't like it. So I much prefer the peak body. But you can't do to people, right? You can't really go in with a prescription. You got to understand your own biases, and I have biases. Everyone has biases. You got to acknowledge them, and you got to I think Nellie touched on it today. This morning, is it Nellie? She was hilarious. Yeah. She was so good. What did she touch on this morning? She touched on
Lots of things.
groups, relationships, the ecosystem. So much stuff. Having a dart. But in regards to, I suppose, doing too, it's acknowledging what you come into a place with. Do you share those lived experiences? Are you mob? If you're not mob, just listen. Stop going in to solve issues. And I think, I don't know, your roles here. I don't know if you're practitioners or if you run services and stuff. I'm sure there's a bit of everything. But just listen. Just listen and take. Sometimes you won't get the outcome, but don't sort of give up and be like, well, I've tried, I've done my bit. See you later. They didn't want to work with us when you go back to government, sort of thing. It's more about just consistency. Just keep trying. There'll be errors, but
Yeah.
That's my advice. Yeah.
From an Our Place perspective, we do it's a test and learn model. So I'll probably unpack that in an example to make it a bit more easy to understand. But we might be working in a particular community where oral language is a real, ADC data tells us that oral language is really not working well here, and we really need to support families and practitioners to really uplift literacy-rich environments. And so we will, work with the providers, playgroups, maternal and child health, allied health, to really come together on how are we going to uplift oral language in this community. how are we going to do that? And how are we going to know that what we're doing is making a difference? And that's the motivating piece, when people see that collectively, when they're all accountable for their little bit in the end goal, when they have that shared accountability of, I've got a responsibility, the maternal and child health has a responsibility, the school has a responsibility, the parent has a responsibility, it just, creates this sense of, we're in this together, but if I don't do my bit, I'm going to let other people down. And so that measurement piece, though, is really important, because otherwise you can go along doing a lot of great things without knowing if it's making a difference. And it's knowing if you're making a difference that motivates that partnership to keep, let's try the next thing because that worked really well. So it's kind of that reinforcing that engagement and working together is smarter and not harder when you know you're having an impact.
Excellent. Now, do you want to turn to talking about challenges and barriers in working in partnership and what you've learned from those experiences? Do you want to jump in first, Elfie?
Yeah, sure. Apologies if I offend anyone in advance on this one. One of the biggest challenges in partnerships is actually sometimes operational manager levels. And I say that with utmost respect because I've used to being in there. But often the challenge is when you are funded for a particular program and a particular deliverable, we can become very, well, this is my lane, my job, and that could be really challenging when you have practitioners on the ground that are hearing from families about the challenges and they want to engage with that thing, but they're getting told, but that's not in your job. And it's how do you support your teams to work a little bit in the grey, a little bit flexibly? How do you nudge up to funding streams and to government and things around? Actually, we need some flexibility here because that will give us the better outcome for this child and these families, rather than I'm just funded to do my one little program here by myself, where you may get some really great outcomes, but you're going to get much better outcomes if you do it collectively with the other organisations and programs and supports that are also working with that same child and family. And so for us, that has been the biggest challenge, is kind of nudging people to think and almost create an expectation that, we have that expectation on our place sites. You are expected to work differently if you have a program on an our place site, because we want to get different outcomes, and the way we're going to do that is to work together towards those outcomes. So that's probably been, one of the biggest challenges that we come across quite frequently is silo thinking, I think.
I think I'd like to add in, and I love what you said, Elfie. I know Claire and Naomi have been here talking about PEEP, and for those that are not sure of what PEEP is, it's a facilitated group of parents and children together. And I facilitate, so I have 180 families that are connected with our PEEP program, which is a huge amount, and I facilitate every single session with every parent and every child. I think one of the big things that I come across is around making sure that partnerships realise that I'm not there to take on their role. My role is not to teach these parents. My role is to listen, and my role is to facilitate conversation. It's what the parents want to talk about. And sometimes it's around, well, if I'm delving into some early childhood stuff, that's not my role. I'm not there. I'm not maternal child health. I'm not the GP. I'm just there to support the families, and I'm not there to tread on anybody's toes. And sometimes that can happen in that partnership, those relationships. So, for me.
That's good. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add around managing difficulties in partnership?
No, all my partnerships are going well.
Okay.
But in all seriousness, it's just like the nebulous statement is relationships are the only thing that matter. Like, really, that's the truth. The more sort of operational, I suppose, challenge is attrition. So workforce, you work with someone so great, you build up, they leave, start again, same thing. And I don't think anything will ever sort of change that, because we're social creatures. Like, there's no systemic change that will address that, I don't believe, because again, back to the sort of Indigenous space, we have a national agreement on closing the gap, and yet the things still don't work. Like it shouldn't work, but it's all because of the people on the ground. That's all it takes. Not really a challenge, but an opportunity sort of thing.
And are you all able to talk a little bit about how you've engaged parents and families as recipients rather than participants through your organisations? Rachel, perhaps.
That's right up my alley. It's my main job. I see our families, they are stakeholders. They are our partnership. They define what we do, you know, their stories, their life, their children. I want to acknowledge them individually, uniquely. That's and it does actually make me I get quite emotional about it because I'm so passionate about what I do, but I see them as our greatest partners. They're not our participants. Yes, they turn up. Yes, there's a space for them every week. They choose to turn up. They choose to be there. Something draws them there. And I want them to feel that they have so much impact on what we do. They are driving it. They think of ideas. Can we talk about this? Can we put this on the planner next time? It's almost like they get to run it, and I'm just there to facilitate that experience. That makes it a genuine family partnership as opposed to being a recipient or a participant.
That's great. With our place, we do, I guess, like family-centred practice is at the core of our theory of change. We're aiming to work in partnership with families and to support that local service system to work differently with families in their community. And one of the key, I guess, strategies that we do with that is what we call the warm referrals. And so how do we support families? Like families in the communities that we're working in often already don't trust the system. They often don't have good experiences with school or services themselves. So we really want to encourage families to access services early. Ideally, our target audience, if you will, is once they're pregnant. Like we would love to access families the minute they're pregnant and hold them all the way through to the end of school and just walk that journey with them is what we aspire to. But we do that, it's like you said, Chris, the relationships, those warm referrals. So we will have a playgroup session, but in that playgroup session, we might have the family services provider drop in and just hang out with families because then they're a familiar face. So if they need to see that family service for a reason, they've already met them at playgroup hanging out. They've already met the maternal and child health, you know, because they're not always in their office. They're coming out and introducing themselves and making them well known. The playgroup facilitator might be walking the parent to the maternal and child sales saying, hey, this is Rachel, such and such is not up to date with their key age and stage visit, you know, they'd love to book an appointment. And it's those relationships between the families and supporting the families to access those services means that families are actually engaging in those services and services are responding quite differently to families because of that way of working. So I think that, yeah, looking at that relationship from that warm referral perspective.
Yeah, good point. So one of the programs we support is called Connect Beginnings, and some of you might have heard, I can see some nods. Warm referrals is central to the implementation of that program. Huge program, by the way, 50 sites across the country. And I think I'm trying to make it relative to what I think you guys might be doing in your spaces. So I think it's like if you have some time in the day, and let's say you're not a practitioner, but you work behind a desk, or I don't know, like your job's not on the ground, but like if you have some time in the day, head down to the local land council or just head down and actually be present, be seen, because all your work at the end of the day, regardless of what level you're working at, is place-based. And that rapport you build by being with each other, you're not going to replicate that anywhere. So if your managers here, allow your staff to do that. If your staff, put it up to your managers, I suppose, because, yeah, there'll be no sort of metric or evaluation that will show the value of having a cup of tea with someone. But like it works. Like we've achieved multi-million dollar sort of negotiations purely because you get around a table and you have a cup of tea, and suddenly everyone's in agreement for this outcome. It's just profound how that can happen sometimes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, are there any resources or practices that have helped you sustain partnerships over time?
I think practice-wise, we've learnt along the way through some challenges through our approach on what works and what doesn't. One of the things that is obviously that foundational is that relationships, building relationships with organisations, building relationships with each other. But one of the things that we're really trying to embed through the Our Place approach is how do we ensure that good work doesn't stop when you do have staff turnover? Because like Chris said, you're not going to stop staff turnover, particularly in the early years sector. You just have to roll with it. But how do you enable those structures so that we look at it so it's a give way sign, not a stop sign? There's going to be a natural slowing down when there's a new person. That person needs to get used to their role and what that is. But how do you make it so it is just the give way and not the stop? So what do you put in place at that structural level that maintains those partnerships? And I think that's something that's been really strong. We've really understood the importance of things like MOUs. And how that can be really important. Induction is really important. So when we talk about when we have new staff that come from not just our staff, but a new early learning director or a new maternal and child health or whatever, how are they inducted onto the site about, well, this is what we do here. This is the culture of the way we work around here. And how do we create that, the chatting at the water cooler conversation so that they can quickly build those relationships with the other practitioners, really quickly. So there are learnings along the way, but definitely some structural aspect is needed. Yeah.
I learned this the other day when someone says something you agree with, you do this.
Oh, right.
Yeah, amen. With MOUs, they're such a great example. It's such a Western sort of system, but a simple MOU can go such a long way because they're not contractually binding, which is very important, but they can set ways of working, and they can set conversation starters for we've had an example actually recently where the government funded an organisation through an auspicing arrangement to a small organisation because they didn't have the capacity essentially, and an MOU was established between the two, and it just wasn't working. But because the MOU was in place, it gave us a point to start the conversation, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. But if you have something to start the conversation, you might be able to figure out what you don't know. It's very...
Yeah, I got this.
I'm a massive self-reflector. Reflection on me is I'm always reflecting on practice when it comes to practice with partnerships is that communication and feedback, and I like just checking in and if there's families that have been referred to us, feeding back and saying, well, such and such is here and this is what's happening, so that you are acknowledging what your other partners are doing and what they're giving to me. So that communication and that trust is what it works in our space, and that constant reflection. And if something's not working, it's how can we improve this? Do we need to improve our communication? Communication sometimes the barrier to so many different things. So it's really good open communication and being in contact with each other a bit more regularly is something I find. Yeah.
And I think that ties back to Alfie's point earlier around not focusing solely on delivery and building in those checkpoints to do that continuous improvement, to do that learning and reflection, so that you can actually say, are we still on the right track? Do we need to make some adjustments along the way? If people remember one thing about working in partnership, what should it be?
Give it time. Yeah. On our place sites, we anticipate that sites were probably really humming. It took 3 years. partnerships take time, and you've got to give it time to make it work. Like, yeah, it's not just going down once, having a cup of tea. Like, it's multiple cup of teas, it's multiple phone calls, it's multiple emails. It's, to kind of build that trust and relationship, because to get a partnership, you have to build that trust. And that takes time.
I think I'm going to relate this to my family partnerships. My boss is probably sick of hearing this, and she'll probably hear the recording and say, oh, God, here she goes again. But years ago, I went over the other side of the world to the beautiful New Mexico and did a relational learning study in around family and parent engagement. And the greatest thing I came away with is actually understanding family and understanding story. You know, and the families come through my door, my beautiful little partnership families, and it's like that iceberg analogy is we see what's on the top, but we really don't see what's going on underneath. And it's time, and relationships take time, but it's actually listening. Take the time to sit and listen. You don't have to say anything, but listen to their story and find out what actually is going on for that family. What makes them tick? What are their barriers to helping their child to thrive? What's the barriers to helping them thrive? And I think family story, and even working with families to, what is your story? Let's draw it, let's create it, I think is something that I find really, really important, that I would say, just do it. Yeah.
That's good.
I love that you used an analogy. I love analogies. But I don't have one for this.
Oh, well, you can use that one if
I've
you
got
want
so
to.
many analogies for different things, like, ask me about data or something. I've got plenty. I think the takeaway, honestly, I learned something this morning when Nellie was talking about just showing up as your best self. Just don't show up at all. It's kind of true, actually. If you don't feel like having that cup of tea, don't bloody go down and have that cup. Do it another time. If you have a Teams meeting that could be an email, just send the email instead of going to the meeting. Oh, I can't do it. Sorry, got hold up. Like, let's discuss another time. Because when you do show up, like, you have a job to do at the end of the day. And I think I love what Nellie said around, like, not taking the piss when around self-care. Like, sure, have a bath and all of that. But also understand you have some obligations to the communities you're working for. And if you don't feel yourself, and it will impact the outcome, adjust. But you still got to get that outcome. Like, you still have an obligation to the kids and the families that you're working with. And I think it's important not to forget that, because everyone here's got shit going on with, like, I want that pay rise or whatever it might be. Dealing with a difficult staff member, all the complexities of your modern age, remote working environment, all of that. But don't let that sort of get in the way of, like, why you're working in this sector, I suppose. I was like, I learned that this morning, and I'm sharing it back with you in a different way.
That's good. Now, in a moment, we're going to move to the Q&A section, but it doesn't seem like there's been too many questions coming through. So I'm just going to give you some instructions on how to post your questions. So open your conference.
Just yell them out. It's more comfortable.
Or you can yell them out. We probably could have a roving mic, potentially. Depends how many questions come through. But in the app, there is, you need to click on the program on the top left, scroll down to the panel discussion and then click on it. And then there should be a live Q&A button that you can click on there and type your questions to submit. So please pop your questions through as they come to mind. But I do have one more final question for the panel, and hopefully in that time some questions come through. But can you talk about a time when a partnership looked great on paper but needed to shift once it met reality? Who wants to take that one first?
I think it's Chris's turn to go first.
I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this. I wasn't briefed on, like, our position as an organisation. But like, probably the closing the gap, the national agreement closing the gap, is kind of a rogue, like, cross-bench partnership, but, like, sporadic commitment here and there when it suits. I'm not slamming the government at all. Like, I'm not. So it's just a good example of blue skies partnership without a solid operationalized process of attaining said goals in blue skies partnership.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's excellent. Look, we've probably got, just as many examples of where partnerships haven't gone well as where they have gone well. And I think that's the nature of the organisation that we work in. Like I said to you, we're not a funder, we're not a provider of any service, yet we're asking services to work in a different way. And so often that's come with, well, who are you to tell me what I should be doing in my job? And so it's sometimes for us, it's probably around like how we're framing it, how we're supporting that message, how we're understanding what we can do to help that person or that organisation. And sometimes we haven't done that very well. It's kind of been, no, you've got to get on board, you've got to get on board, you've got to get on board because this is the best. Where we probably haven't really identified like what was in it for them. And that's a bit of a reflection too on how we might work in that space, that maybe if we had approached it in what's in it for them, as well as knowing, based on the theory of our approach, that will get the outcomes for children. But I think, it's sometimes, it's not just all one-sided when we've had examples. And I obviously don't want to name particular examples, as far as organisations or schools or whatnot. But we've had some, examples of where it has just taken either a long time, just hasn't gone the way we wanted. But other examples where it's great. And that's the nature of partnerships in general.
The only thing that comes to mind for me is that after one of the AEDC forums that we had in Benalla, we talked about the missing gap. And the missing gap was we were doing, as a program, we were doing 0 to 5, which is what PEEP covers. And the antenatal space was there was a gap there. How are we supporting pregnant mums or mums once, conception and all of that. So we jump out and we train up into that next level of antenatal PEEP. And we're so excited, you get in there, you're ready to do it, you've got all that, you've spoken to partners and thought, we're going to do this. And then all of a sudden it just comes to a real standstill. It's just that traction. And then it's like, okay, we're delving into a whole new area. And it sort of, for us, it did stop there for a little while and we had to grow it and think, okay, what's other ways of doing it? So that's where we sort of got stuck a little bit with our partners. It's moving on. You just have to come up with a different idea. Think outside the box. Go to the consumers. We went to the consumers. We asked those mums, those pregnant mums, what do we need? Go straight to them.
Are there any questions coming through? Yeah, excellent.
So if I ask it, you guys can't hear it, or can you repeat to the audience?
Yeah, sure.
How can smaller, culturally specific playgroups effectively initiate partnerships with larger community organisations to broaden their resources, but without losing their unique identity?
Did everyone hear that question?
Sorry.
No.
How can smaller you got it, mate.
I've got a mic. All right. How can smaller community groups approach larger organisations or foundations and to broaden their resources without losing their unique identity?
Oh, that's the wrong way around. It should be the other way around. The big orgs with the resources should be trying to embed and embody cultural safety in their organisations. This is a great example of a systemic issue. Whoever asked that, within your communities, it should be the big players that are reaching out to your local cultural authority holders, your local wisdom holders, whatever it might be, and asking them, hey, how do we do business? Not the other way around. But if you feel like you are a small cultural organisation, I just go humbug people, I guess, and trust that, organisations like SNAICC, Nacho in the health sector, for example, VACA, your local peak body, that they're doing business at that sort of systemic level to flip that question into a way of working, I suppose. But yeah, it's a good question.
Elfie, Rachel, did you want to add?
Yeah, and I think too, sometimes approach those organisations with the specific ask, like we need help with this, so that it's not the whole program. So if you want to keep your identity and the way you've been working, because that's what your community really need, and and you want to maintain that. But what is the resource that you actually need? And be really specific about what the ask is, so that it's not feeling like you're being overrun or ideas are coming that you're not really welcoming at that time. But I think it's also, you need to build the relationship with those bigger organisations in the first place either, because it might be an assumption that they are going to try and make you do something differently. So I think firstly it's making those building that relationship, getting to know the people in that organisation, getting them out to your actual specific site, I think is really, really important too, so they know what you're already delivering.
And then to add to that point, just circling back to one of your earlier points, is that once you do enter into a partnership, if you do enter into a partnership, that you do have really clear roles and responsibilities through a memorandum of understanding, an MOU or whatever it might be, so that there is that clear delineation around who's responsible for what. That's a learning from the Potter Foundation's perspective and funding many partnerships over the years, having really clear expectations around who's responsible for evaluation, IP, everything if you're entering into a new partnership.
That was a great question from Amy. Thank you. Following on from that is another related question from Nancy Lee. How do you balance short-term funding and building relationships, which actually takes a lot of time?
Great question.
Yeah. This is a constant our place scenario, particularly in the playgroup space, very sadly, but we are constantly working with local governments and DFFH to try and sustain long-term ongoing playgroups on our sites, because we know that quality comes from sustained partnerships. But I think sustained programs, but I think it's the power in those partnerships then that sometimes sustains the work as well. When other providers also don't want particular funding programs to end, it's already the networking. So I think there's opportunity to invest regardless, because we never know what the outcome would be. And as we know, sometimes these funding things come at the, as we've experienced very many times, the 11th hour. So I think it's still worth pursuing those partnerships.
Chris or Rachel, did you want to add anything to that?
Look, all the funding is really not in my area. It just magically appears for me. It just keeps coming.
As one of your major funders?
I know we have an amazing team. So obviously, that as a community organisation, we also have some, funded through our community, not just like a Potter Foundation. All these amazing funders along the way, but we know that our local community is a massive funder in our community organisation. So the funding they see the importance of the PEEP program, and we're 12 years in and we keep getting funding. The evidence and the research is showing that this is so important in our community. So that's all I can add to that one.
Chris, did you want to add anything?
It's sort of chicken or egg, I think, from my perspective. I don't really want to talk too long about funding because it's so different in different circumstances. But if you have good partnerships, you're more likely to get funding. So I think it's a worthy investment to partner, because just for the sheer fact of your networks broadening. Suddenly you're talking to someone who might have a small grant over here, state government hears about it, federal government hears about it, bang. You've got a place-based program in place now that has more sustainable funding cycles, such as ongoing programs like Connects Beginning, Stronger Places, Strong People, Empowered Communities. There are these things in place, but you will get looked over if there are no partnerships in place. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but.
There's a question here about pitches, asking if there's something particular that you like to hear in a pitch, or is there any giveaways or anything that suggests the partnership will be successful and sustainable or otherwise?
From our experience is that initial buy-in. If you have that shared goal, like the oral language one, and you've got immediate buy-in, and when I mean buy-in is that volunteering of their responsibility or role in that partnership, I think that's a very quick signal that you've got a very good partnership. So, shared language is a really great example. Like, how do you coming together and having shared language about the same topic, about the same community? I think if you get that very quick indication, it's very unlikely in my experience that things don't work out when you get that very early buy-in.
I'm just pitching it out there. Everyone hears it. It takes a village to raise a child.
Oh, don't let Nellie hear you say that. Sorry to interrupt.
That's my pitch. It's part of our vision. It takes a village to raise a child, and that village is our whole community. It's everybody. Everybody has such an impact. So I just pitch it out there to everybody till you're sick of hearing it.
Yeah, I guess it depends just how you feel, what the vibe is after you have that first sort of touch point. You'll feel if you got traction or you need to reassess your approach. And I don't think a partnership ever really needs a pitch. It could almost happen. I feel like there's a pitch when you're defining operationally what the partnership is, but culminating and cultivating that partnership probably starts at a more personal level. A vibe check. Yeah.
How do organisations make the case internally that partnership work well in real life and they're not add-ons?
Well, children and families don't experience the world in silos. Children and families they don't experience the world in programs either. So we need the responsibility as the workforce to nudge the system to not deliver that to families, because that's not how children and families operate. So I think it's just our responsibility to keep nudging our bosses or government or whoever that this is not how children and families operate.
I think we're very fortunate in Benalla that we are a community organisation that is specifically for Benalla. Every element of what we do is pumped back into the community. So there's never, ever that need to ever worry about what we're doing, because we know we're doing great work. And I think that, we never question that. And, the more people we work with and the more funders and stuff can see, everyone comes in, please come to Benalla and come and do a peep session if you want to see it in action. But it's, we sell ourselves, I think,
And I think that, you've just reminded me, that is a really good point to how do you support people to understand it, is actually go to sites where it's happening. So we've had our place team go and visit Benalla and see what they're doing there. So it is about sometimes seeing is believing. So where can you go and see those partnerships happen to see what it looks like and feels like and tastes like as well? And
we learn from you guys as well. So it's what we can take away from our visitors as well, to say, wow, we could do this as well.
Yeah. I think that's so valid what you're saying. I think it can't be just that though. And I think there's an element of qualitative narrative stuff, visualizing it. But unfortunately, majority of our sector gets funded by the government, and the government needs to see figures. And a good figure to show the government is a thing called a cost-benefit analysis. There's a lot of
it's like a dirty word.
Nutshell is you look at the socio-economic return of a thriving child, for example, and by the time they're 18, how much is that worth in a dollar? I know that kids aren't worth,
that's true.
But for example, we did a BCR for the Connect Beginnings program. I'm not plugging it at all. I'm really not, but it just is so relevant. We did a BCR and it was a figure between $3 and $7 return on public investment. So if you do put that dollar in, right? So maybe that's a way to, convince your bosses, because if we do this, we could get more funding to expand the support.
We don't want to finish on a negative question, so we'll have to make sure there's time for one more after this. But can you speak about any times you've had a difficult partnership and how you managed it?
I'm worried I've said too much already. Like,
I'm happy to. Yeah, so we did. On one of our sites, we had a really challenging partnership. The quality of the program, as far as outreach to families, was really not what we needed, and we went through quite a process for that. Initially it was just chatting with the practitioners, and we'd get a little bit of a speed hump of change in behaviours and ways of working, and then it would go back down. So then we would escalate to their management, and we'd see that cycle again. And then we escalated to DFFH, which is where the program was funded under. And in the end, we ended up having a facilitated meeting where we had DFFH, this organisation, our organisation, to actually mediate what was everybody's role in this, and almost coming back to what's the core thing we're trying to work on, and just really restart that partnership and really come together on roles and responsibilities. So it was incredibly messy for a period of time, but I can tell you a year later, that partnership is thriving. It was so worth the pain. It was a very uncomfortable place to be in, but it is absolutely thriving at the moment. So I guess I encourage you to think about what are the escalation points. And that was probably a big learning for me, was delaying those uncomfortable conversations. We should have had them much, much earlier than we did. But I think you need to, wear the cranky pants, if you will, and just have those conversations rather than let it fester and gossip and, just that resentment that you feel because they're not doing what you want, and then that resentment because, they're telling us what to do. It just, it was unnecessary for way too long.
Just specific to that example, did you have a neutral mediator come in, or was it?
Yeah, sorry. So we did, we had a neutral, wasn't known, DFFH organised them, but wasn't known to our organisation, wasn't known to their organisation, and that was really, really important.
Rachel, Chris, did you want to add?
Not an experience I had.
No, very diplomatic.
Let's try and finish on a more positive question.
Finish on a highlight of your collaborative work experiences. Would you like to share a highlight?
We celebrated 30 years of Peeple UK. Obviously, it's not been 30 years with us in Benalla. We were the first in Australia to get Peeple up and going. But last year, we actually decided to have a mega party. So we celebrated the end of the year with a Christmas party. All the families come along. Everything's free. Everything we do is free. And last year, we had 460 people rock up. We had, thank you. We had beautiful Claire and Naomi as well turn up, and we had past families. It was the greatest celebration. We extended it out to all our partners, and it was probably one of the greatest experiences. And we dress up, we have fun. That shows how well it's all working by all being together in that moment and experiencing it. So that would be
highlight.
Biggest.
For my highlight, I might share a parent's experience, but this example is replicated lots of times on our site, but it's why we do what we do. So we had a dad share recently that his partner and young child at the time moved into the area and started coming to Playgroup. The child was incredibly clingy to mum. Mum was incredibly anxious about her parenting and incredibly anxious just in general. And through that engagement with Playgroup, started to build some friendships and some relationships, but also through the Playgroup facilitator, started having conversation about language development. And so then this child started getting supported through warm referrals to have speech therapy, and then also went on to go to the kinder program. And this dad talks about this child now, so it's 2.5 years later, who is thriving in kinder, and the mum who feels really confident. And he ended telling his story by, "We feel so confident now we're having another child." And it was just the that whole impact of that whole experience for that family, feeling supported and held, having practitioners and friends and everything all on site, helping them through those little journeys, is why we do what we do and why we do it in a partnership way. It's beautiful.
That was a good one. You can almost end on that one. I think there's a lot of highlights, a lot of sort of strategic ones that I could talk about, but I'll talk about, you know, there's Danny sitting there looking very handsome as always. So, you know, that's a partnership. We've got Donna from Minderoo, you know, we've got Sonia from Bandayara. We've got Susan from Dalaga. These are all partnership. Sorry, Derek from RCN has got a little stall out there. I don't know if he's in the room now. I think Emily, yeah, there he is. We got Emily from Playgroup New South Wales. Camille, there she is over there. Hi, Emily. I'm not just going to go around. But like, what a great example of every single one of those partnerships or people that are pointed out, there has been an outcome. These are not just random friends I know. But every single one of those people I've mentioned, there has been an outcome. I think that just goes to show, I guess, why I do my job, really. Like, I could just not do anything else other than just chat to people about stuff. And it's so important to getting things done. Yeah, that's my highlight.
That's great. Excellent. Well, now I have the difficult task of trying to summarise, and I was going to try and do 5, but as you kept talking, I think I've got now 10 kind of key takeaways from the panel. Firstly, and not surprisingly, but relationships come before results. So trust takes time to build, but it's very easily broken. But it is the foundation that everything else depends on, and without trust, partnerships can't succeed, no matter how good the idea. Number 2, clarity of roles matter more than goodwill. Even well-intentioned partnerships struggle when the roles, responsibilities, and decision-making aren't clear. And as Alfie mentioned, and Chris as well, MOUs can be really helpful here in setting clear responsibilities and roles. Number 3, power needs to be acknowledged, not ignored. Partnerships are stronger when differences in power and resources and influence are named and actively managed, particularly in working with First Nations communities and community-led organisations. Number 4, partnerships are living things. They're not to be set and forgotten. They succeed when they remain flexible and responsive to local needs, community priorities, and changing conditions. And this goes back to your earlier point, Alfie, around building in that time for reflection and learning and course correction. Number 5, also one of your points, time and resources are real partnership inputs and are often underestimated. 6, and your point, Rachel, is around families and communities are partners, not participants. And the partnerships between service and parents are just as important as the partnerships across organisations. Number 7, people. Having the right people engaged with the authority to act and planning for staff turnover is critical. It helps partnerships endure beyond individuals and translate into impact. And one of the learnings from the Potter Foundation is really around having distributed engagement. So even if there is a key partnership champion or manager within the organisation, actually making sure that what they're learning is being incorporated across the organisation so that it doesn't leave when that person leaves. Your point, Chris, was around partnership being like the ecological model of a child and really looking at all the different layers that are required for things to succeed. And I think that was a really interesting point. Number 9 was around active listening, and actually really made me think about a point that others may have heard already, but our Governor-General talked about the feedback that she received about working in partnership was that she was often there already waiting to add her point. So she wasn't actually actively listening to the conversation. Active listening is really important in partnership. And number 10, which has already come up and been said a few times as well, is that partnerships are about learning, not just delivery. So building in that time for course correction is really important. I know that's sort of already been covered, but also related to that point is around having shared success and milestones. If you can't measure how you're tracking, then people lose interest when things get messy or when disputes arise. So having really clear and shared measurement indicators along the way can really help partnerships succeed. Is there anything I've missed?
think you've done very well.
Yeah, it looks like you got ChatGPT built in. Summarise this
Right,
conversation.
remarkable. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think please join me in thanking the panelists for their open and generous discussion. And I just want to say, Chris has already said it as well, but thank you for sticking around for the final session of the day. We won't hold you up now between now and drinks. We'll pass back to Danny.
Oh, I'd just like to say there's no thunder out there. It is my stomach has been going off all the time. If it's been going through my microphone, it's probably translating as the weather. So I just thought I'd get that one out.
Awesome. And also I'd like to thank Nicole for agreeing and coming and doing a magnificent job in moderating. And what I would say is that the 10 things that you've got, and referring back, given that Chris has learned so much today from Nellie, so have I actually, you're not the only one, is that they are the ecosystem of partnerships. And I think that's what it is in terms of, what it is that we do. If the ecosystem has all the right parts and they're connected together in the right way, that things work. But as soon as there's something in the ecosystem that breaks, it's not working, there's too much pollution, all that sort of stuff, things start to break down. So please thank. And yes, this is definitely the output of our partnership. No question about that. So again, please thank everyone. We have a small gift for you.
Is it chocolate?
Oh,
Thank you.
No, that's okay.
And I'll put the rest.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm not going to keep you too much longer. Hopefully everyone had fun today with the activity.